Alright, I'm clearly a little late to the party, almost 5 years, yeesh. But today we're looking at a game that I have to say is personally one of my favorites. It does an awesome job of mixing together multiple styles to formulate a moving story. It has a large horror element to it, especially early on. Now, I am a huge fan of card games, especially games like Magic the Gathering, Yu-Gi-Oh, because I grew up with those. But I've always struggled to find games that, card-wise, that capture me outside of those. That's where I find this really stands out. The mechanics all feel very solid, and every playstyle feels viable in its own way. Early on, you'll primarily be playing with the beast cards, which, while only one leg of the game's archetypes, is very interesting and, as aforementioned, has a ton of playstyles. You can go for a high-cost deck with a lot of generators, a low-cost deck with creatures that protect themselves, and even decks of beasts that transform into stronger ones, beasts that move, etc., etc. You'll get my point. You can play this game in so many different ways, it stays fresh in every attempt. Now, that could also be because I am a big fan of roguelike games, games like Dark Souls that have progression, but most of it comes slowly. This game's story has the unique features of death cards. At least in Act 1, when you lose, Leshy takes a photo of you and turns it into a card. You choose values and sigils from what I'm assuming are random draws for your cards. This can lead into some genuinely funny cards, such as a literally free 7 health, 7 defense card that returns to the hand on destruction, a card with 4 damage and 6 health that hits the 3 spaces in front of him that costs a whopping 2 bones, and I'll be talking more about the resources later in the breakdown. While it can lead to some broken cards, it can also lead into many meh cards, cards that are probably better off being thrown into the fire. I had one that cost 4 blood to bring out, and that had 2 health and 0 attack, and get this, flying. Long and short of it, it was useless. I did everything in my power to avoid that one. Or a card that's just a slightly better version of a more common card that you can combine with duplicates. Okay, the story. So, this is from what I've gathered. Feel free to correct me as I'm looking up some but not all of this information. The game begins, and you're in a decrepit cabin. A musky, stale smell pierces the air as you look into the dark void before registering the wide but somehow lifeless eyes staring back into yours. This is Inscryption. The game's story follows you as you make your way through Leshy's challenges, a massive switch up in gameplay, and finally a familiar friend, the Stoat. There are 4 scribes: the scribe of beasts, Leshy, the scribe of wizards, Magnificus, Gramora, the scribe of the dead, and finally P03, the scribe of technology. A very unique feature in this game is that they mixed in found footage to really set in the horror theme. I find it really cool how immersive it was, and even had my fiance thinking I was watching a horror movie without her. Anyways, the game follows the player trying to unravel the mystery of Inscryption. Act 1's story is very short lore-wise, but you will spend the majority of your time here, as it's nearly impossible to beat the bosses consistently, at least for me, until you've built up some death cards that are real game changers, as well as understanding for the mechanics and strategies presented to you. It starts off simple with you going from place to place, but quickly begins expanding into something much bigger, and introduces a puzzle element to the overall game. I'll be honest, I still don't fully understand them. I believe it's as simple as mathing, but it was easier for me to use Google. I will say, the second act of puzzles had a little better of a time figuring out on my own, although I got super stuck on one of them and it had me stressing. As you progress and move through Act 1, the different talking cards will begin to shift and change into their scribe forms. The Stout slowly looks more machine-like, the Stink Bug turns into Gramora, and the Stunted Wolf becomes more like a Christmas tree thing. I don't know, he's got wood though. And the Seasonal Depression. Is the Stunted Wolf actually Santa? Okay, anywho. In Act 1, there are many events. I'm going to talk about a few, but feel free to pause as I'm going to be throwing the icons up on the screen. First one I'll mention is the card choice. While simple, it serves the primary way to fill out your deck. There's different variations of it, such as cost, tribe, and death. One of which you will select the cost of the card and it gives you a random one. Or you select the tribe it's from, you'll get a related card. Particularly useful for filling out decks that rely heavily on the totem. Death cards can be attained after your 5th attempt on their own dedicated squares, or randomly through either a victory over a boss or a standard card choice. Another way to obtain cards is through trials. Select a category and draw 3 cards randomly. As long as you fit those requirements, you get a choice of 3 typically late game cards. Now that we've talked about the cards and obtaining them, let's take a look at how you can upgrade them to chew through these bosses. There are campfires and mysterious sigils. Act 3 has similar spaces, but I'll be talking about those separately as they are different overall. Campfires offer either an attack or health buff, and you can repeat it up to 4 times and twice in the in-game content Casey's mod. Although, you have to be careful as the card you are enhancing can be lost after the first attempt. That being said, it can be worth the risk occasionally, as you can get a card with, say, 3 health all the way up to 11, or a Mantis God that strikes the 3 spaces in front of it with 4 or more damage with it, which is a literal 1-turn kill in most fights, or a great way to push into the second phase of a boss fight without much resource investment. As I mentioned before, there are also mysterious sigils that require you to sacrifice a creature, but one you select will gain that one's abilities. This allows you to create resource loops, make unkillable cards, and makes the game 10 times easier as you can increase your deck's consistency. One last mechanic I forgot to mention are the mycologists. Basically, they combine duplicates into stronger cards. They didn't come up all that often, but I can see the value in them. Now we're getting to the story. Isn't that a crazy amount of mechanics? It gets crazier. The second and third act respectively change the games in their own way. As you play, the cards slowly evolve, giving you more and more hints, culminating in you obtaining Leshy's camera after defeating him, only to find out there is no film. This is when you discover the Caged Wolf and Silver Dagger, 2 items key in progressing the story. After you get the Caged Wolf, you need it to perish, whether that be through campfire, sacrifice, battle, it doesn't matter. Then you place that wolf statue into the stand of the Silver Dagger. Using this, you can become a huge fan of Slipknot and pop your own eye out to tip the scale by 4 points, but it's a one-time use. The real thing that stands out is that once you complete the current battle, Leshy will offer you a new eye. You select the glowing one, get up from the table, and open the clock to find the stunted wolf and a roll of film. Don't worry if you die after this, as you've already obtained the final piece for finishing Act 1, although you do need to beat him again. After cooking him up, you'll go to the next act, where the game's entire art style and vibe changes more into an SNES game. Act 2! Ha 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 ha! I don't know. I'm trying to do transitions. Okay, you get a choice of 4 different starter decks. Each one is unique in their own way. I personally use the Undead deck, but there's a Beast one with cards from Act 1, a Mage and a Technology deck, both with cards and mechanics previously unseen. Gone is the convenient draw a squirrel or card, and you have to rely on your deck building knowledge or online guides to get through. I will say, and somewhat pridefully, I was able to complete the game with only having to look up some of the puzzles. Can you tell I was a nerd in school? Okay, I need to get to 5. That was a pure guess. I wasn't even paying attention there, I promise y'all. This part of the game can feel rough to be thrown into, but once you get the hang of it, it is actually one of my favorites as it expands the story, and you get to directly interact the cards you were previously playing with. You're going to go through and have to beat each of the scribes, but each of them have separate tasks to complete before challenging them that require you to beat their subordinates. Although most of these fights have a difficulty spike, they aren't so hard after a while. The first scribe I took down was Gramora, previously Stinkbug. Her deck was particularly frustrating early on, but after some solid building, we were able to stink up her day and get the dub. Oh my god, this lady is rocking my socks off right now. Oh. Oh, you... Pretty much. Oh, let's go! You know how long I've been stuck on her? Next, I took down Lesh. His subordinates are characters that were previously bosses in Act 1, although they don't carry over their mechanics, thankfully. It's been a few hours, but I'm pretty sure the order I went was the Prospector, the Angler, and then the Trapper. After defeating them, you're clear to go after Leshy, that while strong is relatively easy in the grand scheme of things. A big change in this part of the game is that losing no longer means restart. Next, I took on my boy, P03. He makes use of the cards that rely on energy as their cost. You gain 1 energy per turn. This becomes much more important later on, and I recommend if you're getting to this part of the game to pick the technology deck, as it will get you adjusted for Act 3. He's a unique character in that he primarily cares for synergy and strategy while being highly critical of not only the other scribes but of the player as well. He sends you to defeat his henchmen, and they self-destruct on defeat, literally throwing themselves onto the conveyor belt. The third guy is a depressed pirate bot and gives up after a couple turns. Oi, mate, I know what you're here for. You're asking me to take a dive, but I can't accommodate you, mate. Got special orders in it. Looking to dredge something special. We can duel. I maybe even give you something you win. But I can't be taking a dive. P03 will understand. Don't worry, we got game here. I think. Oh. Lastly, I took on P03 and handled him with relative ease. Now, here comes the fun part, the Magic Scribe. His cards weren't hard to deal with though. Although a new mechanic, you can choose to mostly ignore it. You can choose to largely ignore it unless you're playing his deck until Act 3. No, the hard part were the puzzles, the hard part were the puzzles that I could not find any solutions for online. After banging my head into the wall for what felt like hours, I took out his disciples, getting some interesting cards along the way, and then took his soul. To end off Act 2, you go where you started, and all 4 tombstones will be glowing. Once you approach a tombstone, P03 will pop out and jack the whole game. Act 3! I don't know if this is working. Okay, there's nothing I can do here. I have to put a seizure warning on for that one. That was crazy. Okay, so now the Stout has control over Inscryption. Yeah, this is crazy! My boy! This act begins with a huge shift. What was once a beast field, then an SNES-style game, has transformed into a steampunk dystopian bunker. The cards are floppy disks, and instead of squirrels, you have empty vessels. Suddenly, your resource is energy, and it's like you have to relearn the whole game. This is possibly my favorite part, and that's saying something considering how well done the first 2 acts are. The board has changed from a map to a digital layout, and instead of restarting, you now have checkpoints. P03 wants you to win after all. He still doesn't make it easy and also features one of the most interesting bosses I've ever faced. Her name is Golly, and you create a card. If you're connected to the internet and somebody else is attempting the fight, they will receive that card and it will put you in loading purgatory. This is all intentional, as if the person who received the card wins the boss fight, you win as well. So creating troll cards is highly unrecommended, as there is a chance they'll just give it to you to play it out, or the person won't finish the boss fight and you are still stuck with the card. Other than that, the bosses were relatively standard enemies. One cool detail is that the talking cards became henchmen from the first act. They also expand on the gem system, as I mentioned when talking about Act 2. The way it works is that if you have two cards with corresponding gems and they're both on the field, you get a boost. P03 actually upgrades your empty vessels to first be gem carriers and then simultaneously conduits who can buff your cards further. You also get access to a shop and a new upgrade system. There's ability modify, beast form, which allows your cards to transform to a beast of your choice, very likely increasing their power or abilities, overclock, which upgrades attack, but if the card dies you lose it forever, gemification, which gives your cards gems, which upgrades their attack and defense whenever you have gems of the same type on the field. Build a card, pretty standard. You build your own card. A pretty cool system because it kind of, I find it cool. I don't know. It's way more balanced than what Leshy was doing with the death cards, but you can still make some stuff that's just fun. Recycling, which allows you to thin out your deck, and card swap. As I mentioned, recycling and card swap are the two that most stand out, as they're great options for making your deck more consistent. After doing some puzzles, you're greeted by the other scribes when you go to check the security camera in the basement. This eventually culminates in you winning and then betraying P03, resulting in his death. Shortly after, Grimora initiates the delete sequence and you face off against her. Eventually she gets deleted and you shake her hand. After that you start playing with Leshy and then finally Magnificus. All I can think of looking at him is that one animation, "You're the prettiest tree." He starts crawling to you in an attempt to shake your hand before vanishing into the void, never to be seen again. Afterwards, you get some more found footage where you find out the original owner of the game was deleted by the developers. Now then, for the last thoughts. This is honestly one of the best games I've ever played, and I genuinely feel bad for not giving this game a proper shot until almost 4 years after the release. The story, the world building, and the characters are all on their own level and fleshed out in ways that you can feel the subtle relationships between them. There is also an in-game content known as Casey's Mod, which is the first act of the game but changed to a more challenging style game with different modifiers you can select. If y'all want, I'd love to upload some footage of that and even make a video of it. I cannot recommend this enough if you're in a rut with gaming and just want to feel something fresh and original. Alright, that's the end of the video. I appreciate y'all for watching. Leave a like, comment, and subscribe if you'd like to see more. Until then, peace.